And we're live. Welcome to the First Layer, I guess, Sunday night edition. I'm here with my good friend,
Special Sunday
Brian.
night.
What's that?
Hello, how's it going? I said special Sunday night because
Yeah.
we don't ever do this on Sundays, but
No.
I was very tired yesterday. I was not doing well.
And I had had a busy day all day, so I wasn't really up to doing it on my own. So, yeah.
Mhm.
Now we're back. If you guys like Sunday nights better, let us know. We're happy to move this to Sunday nights because usually Saturdays we got a lot going on. So, let's say hello to some people in our room tonight. We've got Rex Waldy, Cobra TV, Snapshot FPV, Joseph Jolly, Robert 954, Pierre, Trevor Rickert, High Tech Redneck, Dominic Versetto, Brian Bond, The Scarecrow, David Sell, and Johnny Gardner. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the First Layers Sunday night edition of Ask for Help. This is where you get your questions answered right here live about your 3D printing issues that you may be having. Brian and I will do our best to answer all of your questions as they come up tonight. We do have Super Chat turned on, so if you are so inclined and would like to help us out and support the channel, that's one way of doing it. Hey, there's Brody Wallace, and that's it. He's the only new one from Indiana. Wow, we got people from all over. Edmonton, Indiana, Florida, across the pond. RT is here as well with his mug of beer. We had a milestone today. Let's
Yes,
talk
we
about
did.
that real quick. We hit 20,000 subscribers. Thank you for all of your support of our channel and helping us to get to 20,000. Now we're on our way to 30,000. And thank you for all the congratulations and that sort of thing. We do appreciate it. We do appreciate you guys watching the show and passing it on to your friends and neighbors and other people that are in the 3D printing hobby that you think might benefit from the advice that we have. Okay, so there we go. Heather Lynn, 1962. Hello from Eastern Tennessee. Wow. TK's 3D Prints, 3D Buckeye. And I think that's it. Oh, there's KKP 3D. There's our good friend Tim. All right, so what are we talking about tonight? Well, we're asking you for your questions, but we do have a couple that were submitted over the last week or so. So we're going to get into the first one from Terry Kellogg. He says, I currently have an Ender 3 and an Ender 3 Pro. I'm wondering which printer I should get as a third. I've been looking at the Ender 5S and the CR-10S. Is there any other printer you would suggest that has a large build volume? I hear a lot of good information on your show and wish I could remember to catch it live. Keep up the good work. Terry, I would say that in all honesty, the CR-10S would be my first pick over the Ender 5 or Ender 5S, or I think that's the Ender 5 Plus. I think he's mentioning.
I believe it's the Plus, yeah.
I
not to be
would think
confused
it's the
with Pro,
Plus,
which
yeah.
is lesser of a printer. Yeah.
So in all honesty, that's the one that I would probably go with first. I've played with the Ender 5 Plus. I'm not a huge fan of it. I just don't like all that clutter. And I'm a pretty big guy, so getting my hands into areas can be a bit of a nuisance from time to time. And I scrape my knuckles on enough stuff. I don't need to scrape them on the bottom of a hot end or a rail that's going across. And I'm clumsy too, so I'd more than likely rip out a wire here or there. So in all honesty, I would stick with the CR-10S or the CR-10S Pro. Both very good models. Go with the version 2 that is out now, and you'll get good results, I believe. What do you think, Brian?
I kind of like the look of that Ender 5 Plus. It's just I don't have any more room for any more printers, but I do definitely like the Z moving up and down versus back and forth. I find that, especially when you get into the bigger stuff and you want to start speeding things up a bit, that design of printer is definitely preferable. And my Ender 5 regular behind me, which has the same build volume as the Ender 3, I do slightly adore that machine over my Enders. But, you know, your mileage may vary. The CR-10S has been out a long time too, and I do love both my 10S's behind me, but having that plus having that same build volume, it is kind of hard to push people back to the 10S.
It can be, yeah, I agree. However, if this is like your third printer, I think it's easier to assemble the 10S than it is to, or even the 10S Pro, than it is to assemble the 5. I think
Absolutely, yeah.
there's a little bit more involved in setting up the 5. But that being said, I mean, no knock in the Ender 5. I mean, it still prints great. It is, or the Ender 5 Plus, it's got a decent build volume. So, you know, it all depends what you want to do with it at the end of the day. And that's always been my go-to for what are you going to do with it? If you're just going to make small things, you know, like flashlights or, well, this is the only thing I had in front of me. But if you're only going to make small things, going to a bigger printer is not necessarily always the best idea.
No,
Because you're wasting energy at the end of the day because you're only using a small section of the bed. But if you're going to be printing large things like helmets or, you know, Supermen or, you know, big busts and stuff like that, or cosplay stuff, the CR10 build volume or the Ender 5 Plus have great build volumes, and they'll definitely accommodate your needs for that kind of stuff.
and don't forget too that you know, when you get to bigger printers, you're also increasing your failure rate too. So you may want to
Yep,
consider a product like Luban to chop up those models, and only look to the big ones if you absolutely need it to come out as one piece in the first shot.
you bet. All right, let's get into some of the questions here. I know that there were some that I'm scrolling back, so I'll have to take a quick look. Anyone ever mess around with the Reprap Guru Plus i3 kit or RepRap Guru
Oh,
Push i3 kit? I've never. I think that's the Prusa i3 kit. I've never even heard of it, to be perfectly honest with you.
yeah, I'm gonna quickly look this up. It's a budget. Oh wow, that looks like a Wilson.
Oh, does it?
If you got, yeah, if you got, you know what? If you got it for $60, you got a heck of a deal. Kit goes for about 280 US. It looks like. If you were buying this brand new, I would probably say you're probably throwing away your money, to be honest, because you're getting into the range for buying an Ender 3. But if you got that thing for $60, yeah, it'll be a fine little machine. Just probably won't be able to do it as big stuff as say. I want to say it looks like about an Ender 3 kit. I mean, say, hey, $60 is $60. I think you did
There you
pretty
go.
good, honestly. Yeah.
Brian Bond says, hello, I'm using the Ender 3V2 after everything working great for 4 days. Turned it on and I'm getting a black screen of death.
Ooh.
If you are getting a black screen of death, there's probably something going on the board, not so much the actual control box. What I would do is contact the person that you bought it from and let them know, and they should be covering that under warranty. They may ask you to send back the whole printer and send you out a brand new printer. That's a possibility, or they may ask you to take out a piece or take off a piece like the monitor or the motherboard, and they will send you a new one. But check Brian Bond with whoever you bought it with and get that covered under warranty. Because I know with Creality, all of their electronics are covered for 1 year. Everything else is 90 days. So it's 1 year on all the electronics, 90 days on everything else. So
Yeah, and I mean, with that, maybe detail if you can for us in the chat what exactly the black screen looks like. Like, is there a backlight? Because if there's no backlight, it's not the screen's not even getting power. So
yeah.
quickly check your connections on the cables, the most common stuff, and then you don't feel bad later if it was that.
All right, MacGyver 3944 says, I need help. My Z is stuck on always triggered and my Z home's up instead of down. I tried switching the wire on the ZN stop, but it does nothing. Switching the wire on the ZN stop is not going to do anything. What you need to do is go into the firmware and make sure that it's either true or false. If it's going up and it's false, you have to set it to true for that end stop, and vice versa if it's the other way around.
Is it under invert? Okay, there's the directions. I'm just quickly trying to remember what that parameter is called there. It's end stop inverting or something. I'm really good at memorizing this, aren't I?
There you go. Peter Reynolds.
Da-da-da-da.
I gotta bring up Peter real quick. I'm gonna come back to you in just a second. Peter Reynolds called me a little while back and was having problems with his Ender 3 Pro, and it was little things that needed to just kind of be tweaked. And he's in our chat tonight and is sending out a big shout out to me for helping him with his printer this past week, and is going to have to open the Italian restaurant as I was making so much spaghetti. Thanks for your great help, Rich. If you're making spaghetti, Peter, I'm coming over. That being said, yeah, if this is something that Brian and I were talking about before we started the show tonight, if you are buying a brand new machine, it really pays to make sure that you go over that entire machine. And I know that a lot of people just getting into the hobby, and that's, you know, why they come to us in the first place, is they don't know these things, and that's perfectly understandable. But if you've got some experience with prior 3D printers, make sure that your X gantry is level. Make sure that the rollers on the X and Y are not too, or the Z and Y are not too tight. Same thing on the X. Make sure they're not too tight, because if they're too tight, what they're doing is those two uprights for the Z is they're pulling them in. So it's going to go up slowly. You may get one side that goes up faster than another, and then it'll level out again, and then it'll do this all the way up, so it'll kind of step up. And that comes with inexperience of not understanding. And it's not a bad thing, believe me, in any way, shape, or form. But, you know, when people are selling machines, I know when I was selling machines over at Spool 3D, I would walk people through these processes. Unfortunately, nowadays, people don't do that. Here's your machine, have a nice day. But I really think that if you're going back for after service to any company, they should be able to help you with those little things like that. And at the end of the day, I don't mind doing it. I mean, that's why I got into this in the first place, because I like to help people. And just simple things. And once we got those all figured out, Peter's been printing like a champ ever since. Things that were previously failing on him now are printing great, according to the last text message I got from him. So, yeah, just watch when you are buying a new machine and you're putting it together. Just watch out for those things. Make sure things are square. Brian, you got any tips on that?
No, it's just check your machine over, right? I disassembled my 10S5 again the other day, and while I was playing around with it, I noticed my lead screw on one side was a little funny. So, you know, it may print 95% okay, but I straightened that right up, and things are improving. And then you can get into all the fun firmware tweaks and all that. But you know, the main thing is make sure that machine is framed up, follow the instructions properly, watch everybody's videos. Basically, everybody's got a different opinion, and then don't start printing anything complex until you've got a satisfactory XYZ cube.
There you go. And that's what those tests are there for. They're there for doing that sort of thing. Now, you were going to pull up some code.
Yeah, I'm gonna fly over to that. Where is it here?
I opened up you in one big screen, so it's all you.
I saw that. I saw that in my peripheral because I don't have my main camera on that screen. All right, so here we go. So in this is 2.0.5.4. It'll be on a different line number than the latest, but your Z-min end stop inverting. Ironically, they chose to use the term inverting at the end of these statements, and then for the steppers, they put it on a different spot. But for here, if your Z-min is always triggered and the wire isn't broken, then this parameter may be backwards. So take a look at your Z-min end stop inverting. And the other one we were looking at, if we actually filter it to invert, you can see we've got all these ones here, and then, where is it here? There it is. Invert the stepper direction. So probably, if your motors are going the wrong direction, you're going to want to change the invert Z-dir to true or to false, depending on which way it goes. And this also applies if your extruder moves backwards, or if your Y moves in the wrong direction, or if your X moves in the wrong direction. It's a simple inversion. I wish they could have added it to the menu so you could just change it and save it to EEPROM, but that's what we got to work with. So you're going to have to rebuild your firmware, but that's all you got to do.
There you go. Okay, so now we got a couple other questions here that before I get into the last email that we got on August 13th. Trevor Rickard says, I got a question for y'all. I upgraded my extruder to the all metal one. I don't know if I need to change my E-steps at all. All it is still the single gear. No, you don't have to change your E-steps at all. If you went to an all metal hot end is what you're talking about, or if you went to an all metal extruder, you shouldn't have to change your E-steps unless you're going to something like the Bondtech. If you're going to use the Bondtech, then you do have to change it. If you're using something that is a dual gear, you will have to change the E-steps as well, because it pulls material in a little faster, I believe, when you've got the double gear as opposed to a single gear. So right now, I don't think you're going to have to change it, but all you can do is, before it goes into the extruder, measure out 120 millimeters. Set your printer to extrude 100 millimeters and see what that distance is between that 120 and the entrance to the extruder. If it is less than 20, then you've got some math to do, and if it's more than 20, you definitely have some math to do.
Yeah, pretty much you got it. And that's a standard calibration, and honestly, I recommend everybody does it, even if you have a brand new printer out of the box. Sometimes adjusting that will mask some other issues, but in general, like Creality machines are 93 in the firmware. I actually did the mathematical conversion of your circumference of the gear relative to that, and it was something like 92.6. So that one was accurate. But for any other machine, especially when you add a new different extruder like the Micro Swiss Direct Drive or the Bondtech, they will give you a starting value, but that's not the final one. You have to go with your machine and do the extrusion test Richard just went through and figure out what the specific multiplier for your machine will be. And the more accurate you can get it, the better. That's why we like to do 100 millimeters of extrusion and see what that ratio is, because actually, here's the fun fact about 100, which makes it easy. If you extrude 100 and only 95 comes out, that means you're under extruding by 5%, because it's 95 out of 100, and that's why we pick that number. So if it comes out and you have, let's say, 7 centimeters or 7 millimeters left, so you've extruded 113, you're over extruding by 13%.
There you go. Lorax, the Lorax. Do you remember the Lorax? I remember the Lorax. It's a Dr. Seuss thing.
I love that little guy. I was going to say he was great in Matilda.
Hey guys, I've got an Ender 3V2 and I put the bed level upgrade kit, dual gear, upgraded extruder and Micro Swiss hotted. Ever since the upgrade, my extruder has been grinding and cutting my filament. That tells me that you have a clog somewhere. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to say it's more than likely going to be in the tip of the nozzle. What you want to do is you want to heat that thing up to about 240, 250 degrees, because you've got an all metal hot end on there. It's not going to hurt it. Let whatever is in there just completely liquefy and come out the nozzle. If it doesn't come out the nozzle, get yourself an acupuncture needle or something very small that you can put up inside the nozzle orifice and kind of move things around. I would bet if you're having this problem, Lorax, that somewhere along the line, and I'm going to say it's probably in your extruder, there's too much back pressure. So the filament is pushing against something, and the extruder now is doing this, and it's grinding away at your filament. So it's definitely in the hot end. Just make sure that you can push things through easily. If you can, then you've got another problem that you're going to have to look at, and then we can try and solve that at a later time. But right now, it sounds like you've got a problem with the nozzle. Either something's not aligned correctly, or it's not. You didn't put it together correctly, or maybe there's just a little piece of metal from the machining that's stuck in the nozzle, and sometimes that happens.
Yeah, absolutely. And in my experience, it was always that I thought I had tightened the block up enough with the nozzle in there, but I wasn't. I was a little too gentle, and the other night I was a little not too gentle, and I sheared off a heat break. So what I'd suggest, when you're assembling a nozzle, we've covered this in many videos, but
Yeah.
make sure you get the heat break screwed all the way in, and then screw in the nozzle all the way in, and hopefully you'll have a little bit of threading underneath that nozzle still showing at the end. Get that nice and cozy. Back it off a quarter turn, and then heat that bugger to as hot as your firmware will tolerate. So in my case, I set my firmware to a max of 320. I've been taking mine up to about 300. And then only once it's up to that temperature do you tighten that up. Now, where I made my mistake was I assumed that heat break was solid, and so I used the frame of my printer as my counter to turn the nozzle, and it ended up just shearing off that heat break. So make sure you get a good pair of pliers or monkey wrenches or whatever to get a grip on that block, the heat block itself.
Yep.
Grip it and hold that in your position and tighten up the nozzle. If you do it that way, you can peel off pieces of metal in that block for all you care, but it won't over torque the heat break itself. And basically what happens is if you have any kind of air gap in between that heat break and the nozzle, the filament melts and sticks in there, and then you've created kind of like a just a little hydraulic bay where you can apply pressure in there, and then it can back force it onto the filament coming in. So you may notice, for instance, if you're printing, it's printing fine at first and then clogs midway through, and then you leave it and you come back and you go to feed the filament through, and it feeds through like butter. That's one of the reasons. So it's all about learning how the material melts in there, but with an all-metal heat break, especially with PLAs, you shouldn't be getting jams and clogs. It's usually a result of just a misalignment on those two parts.
That's usually what it is. I've got, most of you guys know, I'm a huge fan of the Micro Swiss hot end for all of my Creality products. It's never failed me once. Literally never failed me once. Now, on occasion, I've had a nozzle that's had a little bit of metal in it from the machining process, but it's nothing that you can't clean out. So just take your time, and it should work out for you, and just follow the steps that we've just outlined. Okay, Alteration says, I sheared my nozzle off and the heat break sucks. Yes, I've done
Mine
it.
was a Volcano too. I had to downgrade my Volcano to a cheap J head I had sitting in a bucket because it was a Sunday afternoon. And guess what? That J head's printing better than the Volcano right now. So,
There you go.
well,
John Kitchen says, Ender 3V2 also not storing E-step changes or PLA settings. Are you hitting store that information? And I don't like to do that on the LCD anyway. I'd rather just do it in my firmware or in my slicer. Put those commands in my slicer, and then it's always going to be there.
yeah, you can get kind of. I'm the exact opposite. I like to go and rebuild my firmware every time I make a consistent parameter change, and I'll tell you guys why. Is because then I can use my restore failsafe anytime I'm tinkering around and return right back to what I was working with to begin with. It's just a preference. If you're a code monkey like me, building firmware, I upgraded the CR-10 in 15 minutes earlier today just because it's so easy for me. But if you're not code literate, then yes, that's the way to do it. That's not calling you code literate, Richard. I've been seeing the rockets, so it's just a preference thing. And if you guys see me keep looking down, here's your little spoiler. I'm working on accelerometer data right now. So
Oh, I cut too late.
Yeah, you cut too late. Here we go. Hang on. Let's see if that'll focus in.
You're getting a no sensor found issue.
Yeah, I'm working on it. That's my debugger code right now for the barometric pressure sensor.
Gotcha. Yeah, I've done sort of half of my coding already for the one that I've built. And now I got to get through the other half. The only two things I have to add is the accelerometer and the SD card, so it'll write to the SD card, and then it'll be
it's
fine.
Funny that you got one half working. I got the other half working, but since we're on two completely different platforms, we can't commingle our code.
That's true. That's true. All right. Where else are we here? Nick A. Hello, Nick A. He He says, hey guys, currently printing ABS in point 0.8 and 1.2 nozzles at 25 millimeters per second. Any advice for printing at these nozzle sizes? I love the show. Well, thank you very much. We love having you here. Nick, I would probably say that when you get to a bigger nozzle, sometimes the slower you go is better. But again, it's all going to depend on the material. I don't use anything over a 0.4 nozzle because I don't need to. Most of the stuff that I'm printing, it doesn't have to be quick. It's going to be nice and tight. And it's going to be small things like Batman here. You know, it's going to be that kind of resolution. You know, so that's kind of what's... when it comes to bigger nozzles, of course, more material is flowing through them. The fatter your lines are, of course, the taller your layer lines can be. But again, slowing it down when you get into the bigger nozzles is sometimes best. And I think that you're on the right track with that practice. Right?
Absolutely. I don't know how I feel about large nozzles. They're kind of cool, but you really got to take the ratio of how much volume of filament you're pumping out and actually look at your optimizations, right? A 60 millimeter per second at 0.4 versus 0.8, I want to say that's 16 times? My volumetric calculations in my head are gone today, but it's quite a bit more. It would be the equivalent of trying to print PLA at 120, 160. So slowing it down is going to get you the better results. It's going to be easier on your machine and on your extruder assembly. And then you might also want to look into some of the things such as linear advance and make sure your retraction's dialed in, because at 0.8, the filament can basically seep out like molasses. So you have to go and tune your machine in so it's pulling the filament back before the ends of your lines, or you'll get tons of stringing and all those other fun little things that become much more apparent with larger nozzles.
All right, just as we're reaching the bottom of the hour, we have one more question here from Stephen Marcantel. I hope I said that right. Or Mercantel. He'll correct me if I got it wrong. He says, I watched your videos and followed it closely. I tried to compile and I get an error message. Searching the internet, I found I needed to go to U8G2. So I did that and still get this message. And this is all about Marlin 2.0 to install a BL Touch. And basically what he's done here is the error he's getting is the file, the file name or extension is too long. Error compiling for the board. So what's happened here is where all of this data is stored, the file name is too long. The file name has to be shortened. And and I see where it is right here. It's right under the Windows app. So it looks like he may have two versions of Arduino LLC, and then Arduino IDE all combined into one folder. So I think that's where your problem is. Brian, you want to tackle this? You're a little bit more of a code monkey than I am.
Yeah, so ironically, after, I want to say 30 plus years of Microsoft products, there's still a hard-coded limit on file systems for a lot of applications. So they can only access a maximum path name, including the file and the folders, of 255 characters. So the simplest solution is to take all of your Marlin code for your printer, and you want to go and make a folder on the base of your C drive or on the base of a thumb drive, whatever's comfortable, so that the folder path is 20 or 30 characters long. And the moment you move that and compile in that new directory, that error will go away. It'll simply say sometimes file not found, but then you'll browse there and see the file. That's just simply Windows saying, whoa, that's too long. There's no way that can exist. And that's just a good kind of life lesson with Microsoft. Keep your folder paths short. I've got a folder for my Google Drive. I put all my Marlin code on Google Drive, and I think it's C drive / Google Drive, and then Marlin builds in there. And that keeps it nice and short and also backs it up.
There you go. Dominic Versetto, this kind of in the same vein of what we've just been talking about when it comes to firmware. He says, I've heard that there's a problem compiling Marlin with VS Code in Windows has problems. Is that true? Well, yes and no.
That's a loaded question. I compiled Marlin 2.0.6 today, no problems. Well, I shouldn't say no problems. There was a bug in the game code, and that might be something else. But I have compiled it exclusively on Windows in VS Code, and unless there was an issue with Marlin, it compiled fine every time. If you do have an error like that, please post it to our Facebook group. We'll take a look at it. There's also a Marlin firmware Facebook group for specific bug questions, and you'll always get the right answer there on a compilation issue. But the issue is not Windows and VS Code.
There you go. Now that we're at the bottom of the hour, I just want to remind you guys that we do have Super Chat turned on. So if you've gotten some help tonight and you appreciate it, we always appreciate your help through the Super Chat at the bottom. And then you get to hear this wonderful sound.
Super Chat.
And what's that?
It still burns my ears a little bit. It's so loud and so sharp.
You know, that's the way we do things here.
Let us know a thumbs up if it's too damn loud, because I know that is encouragement to keep it that way.
Yeah, there you go. We've got Super Chat turned on, and it's there because, this is what we do, or this is what I do full time. Brian has a day job, but he's also half my age, so.
I require a day job to fund this bloody hobby.
Yeah, exactly.
I got boats surrounding me, I got printers surrounding me, and as you can see, I got a dark one over here. I got to work on that one.
I've got 3 printers in this room right now. One which is going to be coming out on Wednesday. You guys are going to see a brand new episode on Wednesday, and it's all going to be about the new Ender 3 V2. So that Creality is waiting with bated breath for this review of mine. So, hey, we got one of these fine things from Laura.
Super Chat.
I love it. His avatar is
I'll get my natural one here. Super Chat.
So there you go. Thank you very much, Lorax, for the $10. It always helps. Tim says, updated my CR-10S Pro to the Chimera Direct, however you want to say that. All hardware is fine. Struggling with the software. Is there a way to make the changes to the existing Marlin that is currently on my machine? I'm Marlin dumb. Yes, there is. And if you're Marlin dumb, the easiest way to do it is do it right on the LCD. Just change your E-steps there.
Yeah, if it's just the geared motor, then yeah, that's the only change. But I thought the Chimera, you may have to change the direction of your extruder, but in which case you'll have to recompile the firmware. Creality, I believe, open sourced it, and I'll see if I can find the firmware for the download with what it came with, and then it's a little bit easier to modify. But bear in mind that Creality is not running on the latest version generally, so you might be behind on a few revisions.
All right, so Manly, I like that, Manly. Is that anything? Are you related to Bruce Lee?
Maybe.
Maybe. How do I send you guys pics to my prints? Well, here's the way to do that. You can send them over to questions@thefirstlayer.com. All that email I get on my tablet. I get it on the computer over there, and I see it when it comes in. So yeah, questions@thefirstlayer.com is where you can send your pictures or your questions, and those questions get answered. They have priority over questions in the chat, just so you guys know. But if you want to get your questions closer to the front of the line, Super Chat's a good way to do that, because then it puts it out there for us, and we see it right away because it's nice and big and bold and colorful. So, send your pictures there, or just put them up on our Facebook page. We'd really like to see them there too. And if we can't answer them on the Facebook page, there's always a ton of other people that can do that as well. And here's where you can find us on social media. You can find us on Facebook under groups at The First Layer, Instagram, The First Layer. If you want to follow me on Twitter, I don't do a whole lot there. You can also, I'm Cleveland, I am, and YouTube, of course, right here. Your best bet, though, is to send things to the questions@thefirstlayer.com. And go from there. So there you are. All right, we're back.
Woohoo! I posted in the chat there a link to the Creality's CR-10S Pro firmware.
What?
Heather Lynn.
Heather Lynn.
Question on there. Heather Lynn.
Okay.
After the super chat thing.
Okay, I'll see it. I'm getting
We're,
there.
we're catching up through the chat there. It's always
We're trying to play catch up a little bit here. High Tech Redneck CR30. Any news on that? No.
The only news I've really got that I've seen, because we haven't had our hands on one, is Knack 3D Designs actually has one right now and is doing some playing around with this new slicer. I haven't watched his latest video on it, but he's got a 5-hour time lapse he just posted a couple hours ago printing on this thing. And I mean, it looks wild. I'm actually tempted to try and convert a printer over to a whatever these things are called again, the belt-based ones. It kind of looks fun, but I don't think it's ready for consumers yet. I think it's still in the beta stages, but I have a feeling we'll probably see something before the end of the year on it.
Super chat.
Hey, we got a super chat from RT, our good friend here in Calgary. Thank you very much.
Appreciate it.
Now, we have Heather Lynn 1962, the first layer. Seems to be where I have problems looking. I'm not sure what you mean by that. If you're having first layer issues, one of two things is happening. You're A, too close to the bed, or B, you're too far away. That's usually what's happening, or your bed is not leveled correctly, or as the proper term is not trammed to the tool head correctly. And that is usually what's happening there. If you need more info on that, Heather, drop us a line to the first layer, questions at the first layer, and I'll be happy to get back to you privately, and we can try and walk through those things and see what's going on. Okay, hey, we got another one of these.
Super chat.
Super chat.
A beautiful
Thank
one.
you.
Yes.
Much appreciated.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tim, that bought our pizza today.
So,
Yeah, just so you know, just to elaborate on what we were discussing there, so the INO file is kind of being phased out, especially with the 32-bit printers. And, give me a thumbs up in the video, in the chat, if you guys want me to kind of discuss more in detail what Visual Studio Code is and how you migrate over from Arduino IDE, because honestly, every flag I'm seeing in the book indicates that the Arduino Foundation, whatever is left of it now, is not they're not having any intention on changing over the whole IDE over. I think it's just going to be phased out and move into these Visual Studio Code applications in the future. So if you want to see something like that, let me know in the chat.
So Tim is saying he says no to his earlier question. It is thermistor, direction, and a couple of other things that are going wrong with the CR-10S Pro. Tim, give me a call. You have my number. Give me a call, and I'll make an arrangement this week to come down and see you and see if we can't work out your issues and get them fixed up. Okay, buddy? Now, Lorax, last question. He says, I manufacture firearms and exclusively... Oh, wait, it jumped up on me. And exclusively have been using Nylon X. I hear a lot about it absorbing moisture. I have mine in an enclosure and keep it on a roll. Should it be fine in there? Yes, it should be fine in there as long as you've got some desiccant packs in there. If it's in an enclosure and it doesn't have any desiccant to, absorb any moisture, you may have a problem long term. It may not show up right away, but it may come down the pipe long term. So I would say to get some desiccant in there, but for the most part, you should be fine.
Yeah, I got some nylon 680 here on the floor, actually. I was just checking to see, because I'm like, I haven't put this in an enclosure in a long time or in any kind of dryer. And, it honestly still feels pretty darn good for nylon, but your mileage may vary. I mean, try it out, and if you are starting to develop issues, a food dehydrator for $50 Canadian on Amazon is an easy way just to check it out. Or with nylon being a higher temperature, you can put it in the oven, just be very careful. PLA is the one that I tell don't put in there, but when they're higher temperature ones, you have a bit more room of flex.
Yeah. Heather Lynn, 1962. The mess looks like a bill plate is a dish. Is this normal? So what you're saying is that you've got a bit of a downward bow or a cup, as we like to call it, in your bed. If that is the case, there's a way to solve that in the short term, and that's by taking some masking tape and putting it on the actual heated bed underneath your glass, and that should bring it up just enough so that that takes it away. Okay?
Just bearing in mind that masking tape is not a great heat conductor.
Correct.
I have tried tin foil and stuff, but I find it moves around too much. So yeah, if you just need to deal with that dip in the interim, just go through with raising it, as Richard said, with masking tape.
A little bit of masking tape should solve your problem. Terry Kellogg, have you answered my email question? Yes, we did. Sorry you weren't here.
Let's do it again.
Let's do it again. Terry, I will tell you that at the end of the day, we've discussed that whether it be the CR-10S or the S Pro or the Ender 5, it really all depends on what you want to make. Again, like I said, if you're only making small things, it's a waste of energy to heat up a whole 12 by 12 inch bed for just, some small things that you're printing. But if you are printing bigger things like helmets or statues or things like that, then the bigger sizes are much better for you. I prefer the CR-10S or the CR-10S Pro. Brian likes the 5 Plus. So again, it's whatever you think is going to suit your fancy best. But both of them are great machines.
Please don't buy the CR-10S5. I'm already seeing questions pop up about the S5.
Yeah.
As you go bigger beyond that, the problems can become exponential. And I mean that with all due respect. I do love my S5. It is my fun tinkering machine. But the bigger you go, the small problems that may be masked on Ender 3 will just exponentially grow outwards. And
Yes.
it can be a very tricky machine to dial in. And just because it's bigger doesn't mean it prints faster. I'll tell you that much.
Christopher Nicholson, good evening from Christopher from Bulgaria. Well, welcome to Canada.
Welcome.
Welcome.
It's bloody hot here.
It is. I can't sleep. It's 4:30 a.m. here. I have see you live. Yay. Well, welcome. I'm glad you're up with us. I'm sad that you're up with us because it's 4:30 in the morning, but I'm happy you're with us.
Yeah.
Khalid Alamahadi, I hope I said that right. Hey, we got one from Terry Kellogg here. Hang on.
Super chat.
Thank you very much, Terry. So Khalid is asking, hi, my friend. I have problem with my 3D printer CR-10S V 500 millimeter. After I add BL Touch version 3.1, the Z-axis not okay. I click home. I see the motor Z-axis moved up, far away, or down, far away. So please, I need help. What's happening here is there is a problem with the, we talked about this earlier, inverting the stepper driver or the stepper motor to go the other way. I think there must be something in the firmware that has been flipped, because adding the BL Touch, you had to obviously put on new firmware. So what I would check is to, first of all, make sure that if it's true, you change it to false. If it's false, you change it to true. Okay? And that should solve your problem, Khalid. If you have any more problems like that, again, send it to questions@thefirstlayer.com. And we'll try and get through that again. Do you want to bring that up again, Brian?
Yeah, I just got to hop between my two projects here.
Okay.
Where's Marlin? There's good old Marlin. All right. This is what happens when you have a million pieces of software open. Okay, here's Visual Studio Code. So here's your configuration.h. And this is the number one thing that I will always mess up when I upgrade my Marlin, and I kind of learn it the hard way. So I'll share some tricks with you here. By default, most Creality machines are usually either true, false, true, or false, true, false, as shown here. And then, of course, the E0 direction in my case is false because I have a dual gear extruder on this machine. But for many of them, it will be true for going backwards. So the first thing I do whenever I upgrade firmware and I've got a successful compile, I load it onto the printer, And then I go and do a homing, and I check and see which directions they're moving. If any of the X or Y are going in the wrong direction, I just pull the plug, go back to the firmware, and fix it. Now, if that homes successfully, we're also going to see the Z move. If it doesn't know where the Z is when you power it on, it immediately moves up, usually 10 millimeters. So if you go for your homing and the Z moves down, your Z is now backwards. So again, pull the plug, go and fix those directions. Now, the
Super
final
chat.
Oh, we got a super chat in
We
between
did
there.
from John Kitchen.
Thank you, John Kitchen. Appreciate it. Now, if that all succeeds with your homing, and you start to see your Z move down, your BL touch pin has deployed, the first thing I do is I put my hand under the BL touch and I trigger it. And if it triggers, but it still continues to go down, then your end stop connection on the motherboard is backwards. Because unlike a traditional switch where the orientation of that does not matter, the BL touch actually sends out a data signal on one of the lines. And if you send it to the wrong one, the printer won't know it toggled. So put your hand underneath it and make sure it stops and moves up and goes for another probe. If it doesn't, then we have to invert, do the end stop inverting on the pin. Or sorry, not the end stop inverting on the pin. We have to go and flip around the wires on the motherboard. And we'll go into the detail on the next printer install. We do have a BL touch there because that one I find on a lot of the boards has to actually be flipped around for it to work. But if that all works, and if your probe goes down and is bouncing back, then if it comes into any sort of collision with the bed or it triggers falsely, then you've got an electrical issue that you have to sort out with your extenders and make sure everything's plugged in.
That's
kind of your boring crash course on on what I do with every single firmware build because I always forget to invert one direction.
Next, we've got Robert 954. Calibration cube X and Y are fine, but loss of 0.6 millimeters on the Z. Lower part of the cube looks bulged out. Any help? Ender 3 Pro with the SKR Mini. Old board works fine. Now, Brian's got more experience with this SKR Mini than I do, but I will tell you from my personal experience, 0.6 of a millimeter is a little bit too much. And if you're getting too much, or what we call elephant's foot, too much squish on that first layer, and is bulging out, something is not set correctly. And usually it has to do on that Z axis. So you're going to have to go into your slicer and maybe adjust that. What do you say, Brian?
Specifically with the E3 boards, you're going to want to make sure to bump up your Z voltages a little bit sometimes, in my experience. And also, what I usually do, and let me see if I can pull up in Config Advanced here, I shut off the silent step mode for the Z, and it's just because you lose a lot of torque when you're dealing with the Z, and you want to have that quite solid, to be honest. I've just reconfigured my firmware for my other machine downstairs. Let me see if I have the setting here for you guys. Okay, here it is. Let's go live back to Marlin. Maybe I should just leave the Marlin screen up for the rest of the night.
Let me get over to you.
In the configuration advanced.h, you're going to find these stealth chop lines, and what you'll see is I actually have stealth chop enabled for X and Y, but I've commented out on Z and on E. The reason is twofold. For Z, number one, because it doesn't move the Z up and down too often and it moves really slow, there's not much of a benefit in having the silent aspect. And the reason I comment out stealth chop E is because, again, the extruder makes almost no noise, and it has conflicts with linear advance. So I really only have stealth chop enabled on the X and Y. If you comment this out on the Z, I think you're going to have a better printing experience. But as Richard said there with the elephant's foot, that also sounds like it is homing a little too close to the bed. So what I'd recommend is if we look up the setting for baby stepping, this is probably one of the stupidest, greatest features in this firmware because it allows us to work around our bad calibrations of bed leveling. So if you enable baby stepping, and I also usually uncomment this line for the integrated baby stepping, This will allow you to live readjust your Z offset on your printer while it's printing simply by double tapping your clicker button on your screen. And I use this often because this allows you to tune things on a very fine detail, something like 0.0025 millimeters per tick. And so you can really dial in that first layer as it's printing, or even on the skirt sometimes as it's printing, and then you'll be good for the remainder of that print job. The only downside is if you don't update your Z offsets or you don't re-level your bed accordingly, you're probably going to be retweaking this value on every single print. But when a printer takes 6 to 8 minutes to warm up, and when you're going to be printing for 2 to 3 days, I don't consider that as a big time waster myself.
Super Chat.
Peter Reynolds, thank you very much for the super chat this evening.
Thank you, Peter. Much appreciated.
We're
you guys
actually
can ask questions in the super chats if you want to. You know?
yeah. I want to try and get to a couple more questions here because we're running out of time really quickly.
Yeah, we're going to speed round.
Speed round. We have 10 minutes.
Double the points.
The reason that we try and keep this to an hour is because if it went any longer than that, we'd be totally burned out and wouldn't be able to do our jobs the next day. Okay, Trevor Rickard, got one more quick question for you all. Is this, if this is coming or not, every time I try to print this one file, I upscale it and it always layer shifts. My belts are not too tight or too loose. Stop upscaling. Sometimes,
yeah, how are you upscaling that?
if you're upscaling it within Cura or whatever program that you're using, hang on a sec. I got one more
Super
of these.
Chat.
David
Thank you
H.,
so much.
thank you very much. We do appreciate it. Now, getting back to that question, if you're upscaling in Cura or whatever slicer you're using, sometimes models are done with so few triangles and some are done with too many triangles. If it's done with too little triangles, sometimes what happens is when you upscale that, it doesn't translate properly. So then you get layer shifting because it's in the G code itself, and it literally says, I don't get it. It doesn't understand what it's getting in terms of the command set. So check the G code, see if there's any aberrations in the G code. If there isn't, I would try and download the model again and try it at normal size, and then upscale it by 5% until you get it to the size that you want. And you'll find out for sure where it can be upscaled to. Ryan?
Now, are those artifacts happening at the same Z height? Because you may also be having some Z binding that you're not experiencing with the shorter models. And another thing to note is both Cura and your printer firmware have actually a slowdown algorithm built into it so that you have a minimum layer print time. And so sometimes when you print really small models, it actually slows down your print to make sure the print has adequate time to cool on that layer. But as you scale it up, since there's more to print, it actually doesn't slow it down, and now you're printing at a much rapider speed than you would have with the small one. So if you ever want to experiment with that, one fun trick is to place both your scaled model and your original scale model on the same build plate, and then you'll see if you start seeing new artifacts on the little model, you know you're printing too quickly. Now, if all the issues you're encountering are at the same layer heights, it's time to look into cleaning and re-lubricating your rods with a not a non-greasy sort of material like sewing machine oil or something that can freely pierce and freely flow out of there.
Mm-hmm.
And as well, make sure that your Z rod is not wiggling while you're printing. And that's a good one to move your gantry all the way to the top, and then tell it to go all the way to the bottom, and just look at the top of it and see if it wiggles like this, or if it's just a little bit of vibration, which is acceptable. You're never going to get no vibration, truth be told. So
Exactly. Man Lee, any advice on all metal hot ends? I just switched to one and I'm having a hard time running the retraction settings. Here's what happens when you go to all metal. First of all, you do have to up your temperature a little bit. And that could be why you're running into retraction settings and you're not able to tune them in. I run my Micro Swiss hot ends about 5 degrees hotter than I normally would a stock hot end. So if your stock hot end you were running at 200, run this at 205 or 210. And you'll find that because it expands and contracts differently than the crap that was on there before, or I shouldn't say crap, but the OEM product that was on there before, chances are that's where your problems are. And your retraction on any all metal hot end shouldn't be any more than about 4 or 5 millimeters per second. That's been my experience. I don't know about you, Bri.
In my experience, most of my all-metal hot ends, I don't set a retraction distance longer than 2 millimeters. And the reason for that is when you had a PFTE liner in there, if you went and retracted, let's say 5 millimeters, it goes back into the tubing that pushes it down, and so there's not that much of a risk of clogging it. But now that you've got an all-metal heat break, you've got a transition zone between the PFTE tube, or your Bowden tube, and this metal tube. And now PLA by default does like to stick to metal, but in that cooling transition zone, it can swell. And if you retract too much where it's molten and you pull it back into a tube, it might have an opportunity to swell out in between the tube and the metal. And the other issue I've found too is if you're retracting it too slow, it may actually go and pull molten material up into that area, and that's when you get clogs. So this is the downside with all metal hot ends. You do have to bump your retraction down a bit, but there are slicer settings to help you get around that extra stringing. You know, the stringing rule is number 1, drop your temperature if you can and keep your retraction low. Option 2 is normally to go and increase your retraction, but I'm more in favor of using settings like coasting and Cura just to go and dribble that last little bit out of a nozzle and give it a little extra restart distance when it restarts the next point of extraction.
Okay, we're getting real close here. We're 4 minutes. I'm going to try and answer 1 or 2 more questions here. Jackpot RC says, hi, any good tips for printing in-place model settings in Cura? I'm running a Sidewinder X1, sort of. And what about the CRX Pro? CRX Pro is a very good machine. I'm just not a big fan of single head dual extruder machines.
Mixing nozzles.
Mixing nozzles. I'm not a big fan of them because they clog up way too easy. And I'm having that problem right now on the E-Cube Maker Toy DIY 4-in-1. And I have to pull it all apart and solve that issue very quickly. So, because I got to get a review out on that machine. But yes, I'm not a big fan of that. And as far as print and place models go, print it at what it suggested from the person who created it. So if they're saying print it at 0.2, print it at 0.2. If they say print it at 0.16 or 1.5, print it at 0.15, because they built in tolerances for print and place models. And those tolerances can be all out of whack if you upscale, downscale, or even change the resolution in which it was meant to be printed at.
And just in that too, print those as slow as you're willing to accept, because print in place relies on lots of overhangs and non-support materials, and so you need to give that material the best chance of curing in place as you print it. Otherwise, if you get sag, you're going to start having issues with your gears, you're going to have issues with your hinges. It's always best, especially on, say, the first 10 layers even, to keep it 10 to 15 millimeters per second, and then once it's past all the hinges, if you want to rip her a little quicker, that's what I would do.
Okay, and last...
Alteracious was really... I'll just quickly pop this one out.
Okay.
Alteracious. School 3D, yes, they do carry solid bed mounts. I bought a few of them from there. They're just a screw spacer. You might be able to find them even at your local Home Depot.
You bet.
Or you know what? If you feel like it, 3D print one. Do it out of PET G, and you'll probably be fine. I've seen a lot of people do that.
All right. Unfortunately, we don't have time for any more questions, but we do have one more that I want to get to. It's from Garbage Mouth Carl. I love that name, by the way. Says, hi guys, long time watcher, first time caller, LOL. I just ordered a BL Touch for my Ender 3. Motherboard is the SKR E3 DIP 1.0. What are basic Marlin settings? All you're going to have to do is basically turn on the BL Touch and you're good to go. You shouldn't have to adjust anything more because you're going to adjust your Z offset after it's installed, and you can do that right on the LCD. Brian?
Specifically with that board, look up instructions. I believe the E3 1.2 is the same way. take a look online, because the number one issue I've seen with the BL Touches and those boards is there's a pin orientation issue, both with the E0 end stop and with the servo port you plug it into. So the long and funny story is that there's three ways you can hook it up. You can either hook it up correctly, you can hook up the wrong way and you power up your machine and your LCD is not turning on, or you hook it up the correct way and nasty things happen when you tell it to deploy the probe because you're sending the deploy signal down the ground. So just look up any video, especially if you bought, let's say, a Creality BL Touch versus the Ant Labs BL Touch, because the coloration of the wires are different. Code-wise is very simple. It's just the electrical properties, and I'm telling you guys because I've done it so many times where it's a bloody miracle I did not fry those boards. So please find a guide online and follow their instructions. If you need a hand, send us an email at questions@thefirstlayer. I'll tear down one of my machines and send you some photos.
Okay, with that said, everybody, sorry we didn't get to everybody's questions near the end here. We do apologize, but it is 8 o'clock. And with that said, both of us have stuff that we got to get on. I got to record Wednesday's show tomorrow. And I want to go up and have some more supper. I kind of rushed supper because it came 10 minutes before I had to be on the air.
Yes. Are we
so
allowed
with
to say
that,
it's time for Sunday night provisions?
yeah, if you guys like the Sunday night, we may just permanently switch to Sunday nights instead of doing it on Saturday nights, because we got a lot of things going on the next few Saturdays. So let us know. After the show, you can leave a comment down below. Give us a thumbs up if you like tonight's content. Again, leave us a comment down below after the live stream is ended. Share it with your friends. Share the channel with your friends. And we are going to see you next time right here on The First Layer. Remember that The First Layer is always your foundation to
Wait, wow.
a great print.
Wow. Great print. I was about to say First Layer. This is what happens when I go away, okay? For all of you who missed me, I was stuck out of province due to a necessary funeral. Had to drive 1,000 miles, and my brain is blurred because of all the delicious Colombian peaches, and I've got a bottle of cherry wine I want to get into down there. So.
Oh, I'm coming to your house.
Yeah.
With that said, I know. With that said, guys, we are going to see you back here on Wednesday with our review of the new Creality Ender 3 V2. I know there's quite a few of them out there, but ours is always a little different because we tear things apart. So we will see you on Wednesday with that review of the Creality Creality Ender 3 V2. V2. I just leave it like peace. So we'll see you guys. Bye.
Bye for now.
Y'all need some crown. Jack.